They laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but with that quiet, knowing tone that reaches deep into your chest and leaves a hollow echo. It was the kind of laughter that did not need to be shouted to wound. He felt it brush against him, a soft wind carrying a weight he could not put into words. Have you ever felt that? The way someone's amusement, so light to them, can feel like a small stone pressed into your ribs. He looked at them, their faces bright with the ease of judgment, and for a moment he imagined speaking. Perhaps a word, a sharp one, could have changed the air between them. Yet something inside him whispered to stay quiet. Why? Because in the quiet, he realized there was a kind of clarity that words could not hold. In silence, he could watch. He could feel. He could notice without adding fuel to the fire. And so he did nothing. He let the laughter roll over him, not like water that soaks, but like a gentle wind brushing past a tree, bending the branches, but leaving the roots untouched. He noticed how their eyes shone, how the corners of their mouths lifted, how they thought themselves clever, and he felt a strange mixture of sorrow and understanding. Sorrow for them, that they had to find amusement in another's quiet heart, and understanding because he, too, had once been young and unaware, quick to speak and quick to stumble. It was in that stillness that he first felt the stirrings of something new, not anger, not pride, something quieter, slower, a small pulse of power that did not demand attention, that did not seek validation. Could it be possible, he wondered, that strength was not in words, nor in swift action, nor in winning some fleeting argument? Could it lie simply in the patience to feel fully, to hold oneself gently, and to resist the pull of immediate reaction? He breathed slowly. One breath in, one breath out. He felt the tension in his shoulders release little by little. He watched the laughter continue, now more like a distant echo than a sharp strike, and with each passing moment, he felt the hollow space inside him begin to fill, not with their approval, not with their approval, not with their approval, not with their understanding, but with the subtle warmth of self-possession. It was the quiet knowing that he was here, fully present, fully himself, and that their judgment could not touch the core of who he was. He thought of the times he had been laughed at before, the moments when words had stung, when he had spoken too quickly and regretted the echo of his own voice. And he realized that in those moments it was never truly the words that hurt. It was the letting go of oneself, the surrender to the small fire of insult, the forgetting that one could simply watch, breathe, and remain whole. And so he watched, and so he breathed, and in the watching, he discovered a rhythm of understanding. How strange, he thought, that something so simple, just the act of remaining calm, of holding one's center, could feel like a quiet rebellion. A rebellion not against them, not against the laughter, not against the fleeting judgments of others, but against the restlessness inside himself that had once urged him to respond too quickly, to give power to what was not truly his to take. The laughter began to fade on its own, as laughter does, leaving behind only the gentle rustle of air and the soft beating of his own heart. He listened to it, that quiet rhythm, and felt a subtle shift. The world, in that small moment, seemed less urgent, less sharp. He felt that he could stay in the world without being carried by every passing gust of amusement, without needing to prove, explain, or defend. And in that silence, something else arose. Not pride, not triumph, but a quiet sense of presence, of being steady in the middle of small storms. He wondered if they knew, he thought, that their laughter, so light and thoughtless to them, had passed over him like a leaf floating on water, seen, acknowledged, and allowed to continue on its way without sinking him beneath its weight. Could it be, he asked himself softly, that this quiet, gentle endurance was a kind of first wisdom, that in choosing to remain still, he had already begun to understand the secret that others might chase their whole lives, and he did not say these things aloud. He did not need to. The truth settled quietly within him, like the slow accumulation of sunlight in a dark room. It was enough that he felt it. It was enough that he could carry it silently, without announcement, without proof. And as he breathed, watching the light touch the edges of the room, he understood that the world would always have laughter, always have dismissal, always have those who sought to measure others by their own fleeting standards. But he could choose, in each small moment, to meet it with nothing more than calm observation, gentle endurance, and the subtle unspoken knowledge that silence, when held with care, could be a power far greater than any word spoken in haste. And in that quiet, he felt himself rise just slightly above the moment, not with loudness, not with force, but with the soft, unshakable presence of someone who had learned the gentle weight of being fully his own. He breathed again, and for the first time he smiled. Not at them, not at what had been said, but at the quiet strength he had found waiting all along within himself. They tried again. This time, it was not laughter, but a quiet push, almost imperceptible, as if they wanted to see him stumble without needing to raise their voices. He could feel it, though, in the way their eyes lingered a moment too long, in the subtle shift of their posture, in the tiny suggestion that he was out of place, not enough. And he noticed how easy it could have been to react, to speak sharply, to let his voice cut through the room like a small lightning bolt. But he did not. He felt the urge rise like a wave curling around him, asking for release, for the heat of expression to chase it away, and yet he held himself still. He breathed slowly, deliberately, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, listening to the quiet rhythm that no one else seemed to notice. In that rhythm, he found a space, a pause between the stirrings of his mind and the world pressing against it. Could it be possible, he wondered, that strength did not belong to those who pushed or pulled, but to those who could simply remain fully aware, fully present, fully unshaken? The room seemed smaller in that stillness, and yet more expansive. He noticed the small details that went unseen when words were flying, when judgments were loud, the way the light softened against the wall, the faint creak of a floorboard under weight, the subtle tension in their movements as they waited for a reaction that never came. He understood then that their insistence on a response was not really about him. It was about their own discomfort, their need to see others bend, to watch a spark of weakness and call it confirmation of their world. And he could see it without anger. Could he really see it without anger? He asked himself quietly, and the answer came as a slow, gentle yes. For a long time, he simply observed. He watched the shifting expressions, the small adjustments, the unspoken expectations that hovered between them. And in that observation, he felt something unexpected, a curious sense of freedom. When he did not react, when he did not give them the satisfaction of a spark of disturbance, he discovered that they began to falter. Not dramatically, not with sudden change, but in the subtle, quiet way that comes when someone realizes that the world does not bend to their will. And he realized, with a calm curiosity, that this quiet power, this restraint, was perhaps more potent than anything he could have said aloud. He felt a calmness grow in him, a deepening of something he had sensed before, but had not fully known. It was the knowledge that his worth was not measured by their perception, their amusement, or their need for others to stumble. It was measured quietly, internally, by the steadiness of his own presence. And as he breathed, he felt the tension in his limbs ease, as if each careful inhalation was washing away the small tremors of expectation, the small weights of needing to prove himself. They tried again, in different ways, with subtle words and quiet gestures, each meant to unbalance him, to disturb the calm he carried like an invisible cloak. But he remained still. He listened, he felt, he observed, and he noticed how strange it felt to watch without responding. There was no triumph in it, no pleasure, no satisfaction that came from seeing them falter, only a soft, deep sense of being anchored, of standing in a place that was entirely his own, untouched by the small tides that rushed around him. He wondered, as the moments stretched, if anyone else ever noticed this power in silence. Or perhaps it was not meant for others to notice. Perhaps it was meant only for him, as a quiet refuge, a place where the mind could settle, where the heart could breathe, where the world could continue its noise and yet leave him untouched. Could it be that restraint, not reaction, was the first step toward understanding the weight of one's own being? The air seemed different when he moved through it this way, lighter, yet filled with a depth that was unseen. Each small act of piety, and each decision to remain calm, to hold space for himself, felt like laying stones along a path no one else could follow. And he realized that in this path there was no hurry, no audience, no need for applause. There was only the slow, deliberate unfolding of self-possession, the gentle shaping of a character not known by others, but deeply felt within. And so he breathed again, softly, letting the quiet grow around him like a thin, protective fog. He did not speak, He did not argue. He did not try to explain. He simply remained. In that quiet, he felt the subtle pulse of strength, the inner discipline that comes not from proving, but from holding oneself gently, fully aware of the world, fully aware of the world, fully aware of oneself. And in that calm, he began to understand something he had only sensed before, that not reacting, not giving energy to their attempts, was not weakness, but a kind of inner power, a power that did not shout, that did not demand, that did not need recognition, a power that simply was, quietly, persistently, and entirely his own. Time passed quietly, and with it came a subtle shift. They continued their small games, their quiet judgments, their attempts to measure him in ways he had long since stopped caring about. And yet, he felt their gaze in a new way now, not as a threat, not as a push to react, but as something he could observe calmly, almost curiously. How strange, he thought, that they could still misunderstand him, still assume weakness where there was none, and that it no longer mattered. Could it be that true strength was not about being seen correctly, but about seeing oneself fully, even when others could not? He walked through the days carrying a quiet steadiness that surprised him, not because it had come suddenly, but because it revealed itself slowly, like a stream carving a soft path through stone. Each moment of restraint, each choice, too, remained silent when provoked. Each small act of observing, rather than responding, became a part of him, a subtle thread weaving an authority that did not demand attention. He began to notice it in the way he moved, the way he breathed, the way the world seemed to meet him differently, not with less, perhaps, but without the pressing urgency of needing to test him. And yet, there were moments when their misunderstanding pressed against him, when the weight of assumptions, the small misjudgments, settled like dust in the air around him. They did not see him as he was. They saw only what they wanted, what they feared, what they expected. Did it sting? Perhaps, in the first moments, it had. But he learned to feel it without giving it a voice, to notice the slight pinches of their perception without letting them settle into his own sense of self. Was this not a strange and gentle kind of freedom? To be misunderstood and yet untouched by it. He watched them continue, not with resentment, not with bitterness, but with a quiet patience that felt deeper than any words he might have spoken. How often had he rushed to explain, to justify, to demand recognition? And yet here, in this long stretch of quiet endurance, he discovered something far more enduring. Each moment of holding still, of choosing silence over reaction, became a quiet building of character, a soft shaping of a presence that was his alone, unshakable by their judgments, untouchable by their fleeting amusement. He began to notice the small ripples that came from this restraint. A glance held a moment longer, a pause that was not anxious but deliberate, a wait that no one could name yet that made them hesitate, unsure of how to reach him, and he felt no satisfaction in it, no pleasure, only a calm recognition of cause and effect in the simplest, most human way. Could it be that the world, when met with quiet sign, restraint, begins to bend in subtle ways without a word being spoken? Yeah. And in that quiet, he began to hear something else, his own voice within. Not the voice of reaction, not the voice shaped by others' expectations, but a voice that spoke softly, steadily, from the center of himself. It reminded him of the first moments when he had discovered the power of stillness, when he had first felt the pulse of calm beneath the urge to respond. Now, it was no longer a discovery, but a companion, a gentle rhythm that guided his thoughts and actions, that reminded him that he did not need to prove, explain, or justify anything. There were times when he felt invisible, or so he thought, unnoticed by those around him. But he began to understand that the quiet presence he carried was not dependent on being noticed. It was a power entirely within, one that needed no witness, no applause, no validation. Did they ever realize it? Perhaps not. And did it matter? Not at all. For in this stillness, he discovered something larger than their perception. A life quietly lived, a self fully possessed, a dignity untouched by misunderstanding. He thought about the small moments that had once tempted him to speak, to argue, to prove himself. Each had been a test, a pull toward the noise of the world, a chance to surrender the quiet strength he was learning to carry. And each time he resisted, he felt the subtle shaping of something unseen. But undeniable, how strange it was, he reflected, that the simplest acts, breathing slowly, holding still, observing fully, could build an authority no one could take away, no one could diminish, no one could mistake. And so he moved through the days, carrying this presence quietly. Not with display, not with pride, not with a desire to be recognized, but simply because it was part of him. The small misunderstandings, the quiet judgments, the fleeting attempts to paw, revoke, they passed around him like shadows, leaving him untouched. And in this calm, he began to feel a depth of self-respect that did not shout, did not demand, did not need to be earned. It simply was. He breathed in, slow and steady, and let the quiet settle like soft light across his heart. He did not resent them, did not wish them harm, did not seek acknowledgement. He simply remained fully present, fully aware, carrying the subtle, invisible power that comes from patience, observation, and the gentle refusal to be moved by the passing whims of others. And in that quiet presence, he understood that this unshakable center was a treasure far greater than any fleeting recognition, any passing judgment, any applause. Years passed quietly, and with them, the laughter that had once brushed against him like a sharp wind grew faint. It did not vanish suddenly, nor was it erased completely, but it softened, like a voice remembered from a dream. He noticed with gentle awareness that they no longer pressed against him in the same ways, no longer sought the flicker of reaction that had once delighted them. And in this soft fading, He felt a calm settle even deeper within him, a quiet space where nothing external could reach without his consent. He walked through those days with a new ease, not a loud confidence, not a rush of pride, but a quiet knowing that came from years of simply observing, simply breathing, simply holding still. That all this time the power had been quietly building within him, like a small spring forming under the snow, slow and unseen until it found its gentle course. He thought of all the moments he had resisted, all the times he had stayed silent when words might have flared and burned, and he understood now that each of those moments had been shaping him in ways that no recognition, no applause could ever have due. Nay, sometimes he thought of them, those who had once laughed, who had once sought to measure him by the weight of their own amusement. Did they regret it? Perhaps could they ever understand what had passed quietly between him and himself? Perhaps not, and yet it no longer mattered. For the understanding he had gained was silent, soft, and entirely his own. There was no bitterness in it, no triumph. Only the calm, steady warmth of self-possession, the subtle joy of knowing that nothing external could disturb the quiet center he had nurtured. He breathed slowly and felt the rhythm of life around him, the gentle flow of time, the quiet pulse that no one else noticed but that he could feel in every step, every breath. And he realized that the world, in its noise and its judgments, its laughter and its small cruelties, could pass on its way without touching the core of who he had become. How strange it felt to carry such peace, not because the world had changed, but because he had learned to carry himself differently within it. Could this be what freedom truly was? Not the absence of challenge, not the absence of misunderstanding, but the deep, unshakable calm that comes from knowing your own worth and refusing to give it away. He reflected on the small lessons hidden in the quiet years. The lesson of restraint, the lesson of observation, the lesson that silence is not emptiness, but a kind of presence stronger than noise. Each moment of patience, each choice not to react, each breath held in careful awareness had become part of the landscape of his being. And in that landscape, there was a calmness no one could disturb, a dignity that required no witness, a strength that needed no expression beyond its own quiet existence. He thought, too, of the subtle ways the world had changed. Perhaps it had not changed at all, except in the soft echoes of their own reflection. Hay had laughed once. They had pressed, they had tried, and now time had passed, and they had faded from the immediate space of his mind. But their small regrets, their quiet realizations, their moments of reflection, if they had any, could never diminish what he carried within. Could anyone ever truly measure such a thing? Could anyone touch it? And he smiled gently, knowing the answer. It was a smile without triumph, without pride. It was a quiet smile that rose from the soft understanding that he had arrived somewhere unseen and unshakable. He carried nothing but himself, fully present, fully aware, fully at peace. And this peace, he realized, was not fragile. It did not depend on absence or silence from others. It was present even in their shadow, even in their distant memory. It was simply there, like the slow, steady rhythm of the heart. A truth that required no acknowledgement, no validation, no audience at all. He sat quietly in the spaces of his own thoughts, letting the stillness settle around him. The past, with its small tests and subtle trials, had become a landscape he could walk without fear. And he understood, finally, that this quiet presence, the inner calm, the self-respect, the gentle strength, was more powerful than any reaction he might once have imagined. It was a power that did not shout, did not demand, did not need to be recognized. It simply was, and in that simplicity, it was complete. And as he breathed, slowly, softly, he felt a deep satisfaction that needed no words. Not a loud satisfaction, not a fleeting pleasure, but a quiet contentment that filled the space inside him like a gentle light. The world would continue. Its laughter and its judgments, its misunderstandings and its small regrets. And he would remain soft and steady, carrying nothing but his own calm, his own dignity, his own unshakable center. In that quiet knowing, he felt a peace that was endless, gentle, and entirely his own.